The honourable member for Halifax Needham.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's a pleasure to stand here and speak to Clause 1 of Bill 75, an act respecting a teacher's professional agreement and classroom improvements. It says in the preamble to the act that whereas negotiations conducted in good faith between the minister and the union are at an impasse following the rejection of them.
I'd just like to remind the Speaker we're talking on Clause 1, not the preamble. You can talk on the preamble later. The honourable member for Halifax Needham.
So this act is supposed to resolve the situation that we're in now. We're in a situation now where teachers have been circling Province House all night with cowbells, where my children have been out of school either because of snow, but will be out of school tomorrow, where teachers in droves have sought to share with us what they are struggling with in their classrooms. And I found the presentations yesterday to law amendments incredibly moving. And perhaps no comments more so than those of a principal who literally begged the government not to have another commission. He's in a position of having to support his employees as a principal. He's their immediate supervisor. And he does not have the resources that he needs to support his employees under his direct supervision to do their job in the best interest of the children in their classroom. And I think as we consider this bill, we really have to consider our role, not as direct employers of that principal, but we're the government of Nova Scotia. It's the public education system. We are in a way in a situation similar to that of an employer, all of us together collectively, and we are not providing what the principals and the classroom teachers and the students of Nova Scotia need to be able to thrive and impart and receive education through the public schools of Nova Scotia. So while this is meant to be an act regarding classroom improvements, I think it falls far short. And it falls short for a couple of reasons. One is because there's no immediate action. And over the course of the hours that teachers came to offer their expert testimony to law amendments, and during the past 3 months, the teachers have been sharing their stories online, and I know individually with many of us in our constituency offices or in coffee shops. They've told us what some of those immediate improvements are. And if the government wants to create some good faith with the union and create some good faith with teachers, and I think really be taken seriously as an ally to teachers in promoting a good public education system, the first step is to act on some of those things that teachers have been asking for. With a number of colleagues, I serve on the Human Resources Committee. And there, the Deputy Minister and a number of other high-level bureaucrats from the Department of Education testified last week about the literacy strategy. And it sounded so lovely, this initiative and this training and this rollout and these mentors visiting these schools with this timetable so that we can achieve this percentage of improvement on literacy rates across the system. But I have to say that, especially in wake of the testimony that we heard at the Law Amendments Committee, it feels completely disconnected from the planet that teachers are actually on, from the classrooms that they're struggling and sometimes drowning in. Teachers have shared what they need. I appreciated the intervention earlier today from my colleague from Dartmouth East, citing some of the recommendations from the Freeman report. Those recommendations were based on talking to teachers. So there are recommendations that are there that have been needed, that have been called for action, urgent action, to help classroom teachers, and we haven't done it. What are some of the things that teachers need? They need lower class sizes. They need lower class sizes, particularly at the high school level and the junior high level. I think if we could immediately stop as many initiatives as reasonably possible and redirect department resources to supporting smaller class sizes. If you've got teachers who can't walk around their classrooms because they are at the limit of the fire marshal, that is not a quality education, and that has got to be higher priority than getting to an agreement so that this can be a tick, we got our way. Yeah, it's been negotiated 3 times with 2 different executives, but my sense is that it's been a train on one track, and teachers have not been directed the direction of that train, and there's been no willingness to take a side spur and go off in a slightly different direction. So I just don't believe that, from what we've heard from the teachers of Nova Scotia, that there is any energy or any faith or any trust that an investment of their time in the council to improve classroom conditions is worth their participation. They have participated, they have spoken, they have not been listened to. In a speech that I made in November about the NDP's proposal to repeal Bill 148, I spoke about the importance of relationships and said that there's no shortcut. This bill is trying to take a shortcut. This bill suggests to me that the government does not feel it is worthwhile to enter into the messiness and, yes, the time required to actually build good relationships with the Nova Scotia Teachers Union. And there is no question that that relationship has been badly damaged. And the Premier can try to make that sound like it's all like the executive has misrepresented the wishes of the union members, and that a tentative agreement recommended by the executive ought to have been accepted by teachers. But that's simply not the case. It's a tentative agreement because it's a tentative agreement. The tentative agreement was the best tentative agreement that those union executives and bargaining members were able to get from the other side. But to really enter into and repair that relationship, I think requires a couple different steps. I think first it does require responding urgently to the calls from classroom teachers for some changes. They don't want to go back to normal. They don't want to go back to normal. They don't want to go back to having more face-to-face time with their laptop or their desktop that takes 20 minutes to boot up in the case of one of the teachers who testified at law amendments. They don't want to spend more time looking at that desktop than they do at any one of their students. They want to have the time to greet their students as they come in the door. They don't want to be inputting data. We have a lot. I'm kind of a younger generation than some members of this House, so I'm not the youngest one here. I'm so aware of the amazing people in their 20s in Nova Scotia who are trying to stay here. And this province can be a really challenging place to stay. How about if we hire a person per school just to do data entry, but also to be an extra person in the climate of that school? How about if we design a really great form that kind of captures all the information that teachers typically have to enter into those old desktops or the laptops that are on the desk that are far away from the door that keep the teachers from actually making eye contact with their students? I bet a couple whip-smart Nova Scotians in their 20s could figure out all of that information and how to get it onto one piece of maybe double-sided paper in like a couple of weeks. And a couple teachers could test it out, and we could say to teachers, you don't have to do this. You don't have to do this in your classrooms. You can spend your time actually in relationships with the kids that we send into your care and into your classrooms for education. I think that would make a huge difference. And it's just one idea. And there are other ideas that are fully developed by teachers that have been set out in lists. Just do one of them. Don't ask them to wait. Because they really can't. I was thinking of a metaphor for the kind of Nova Scotia we build with leadership that is sort of centralized versus the kind of Nova Scotia we build with leadership that really draws from the wisdom of the people closest to the ground. And it popped into my mind, the Convention Centre versus the Halifax Central Library. Some people probably like the Convention Centre. It's sort of glossy and makes a big statement. And maybe it'll look good from people from away. Maybe it'll measure up well against the convention centers of other places. Maybe it'll put us at a national average that we're always trying to attain. But truly, the Halifax Central Library is the accomplishment of this city. And it involved so many consultations. It involves so many voices. It involves so much time relationship building and frankly getting over the cynicism of many, many people in Halifax who have been consulted with often and heard too infrequently. But you can look at both of them and you know which one is the treasure. Well, this act, it isn't shiny, but this is the convention center. This is, I know where I'm going, I know what I want, and I'm going to get there, and I'm going to be pretty efficient about it, and you're going to take it. And taking a time out and addressing the immediate and urgent needs of the experts who are in classrooms, who have spoken, who have shared what they need, and then repairing the relationship with the Nova Scotia Teachers Union and using them to help engage some teachers to work on the slightly longer term stuff. That's the way to the Halifax Public Library. And again, there is no shortcut. There's no good shortcut. One of the major elements of this bill is the Commission on Inclusive Education, in which no member of the union can participate. One of the things that commission is tasked to do is to present a comprehensive literature review of the best practices in inclusive education. Goodness! I've had a few friends do PhDs, and they've done comprehensive literature reviews, and they've taken a heck of a long time. I bet we have something akin to a comprehensive literature review on the best practices in inclusive education already on a shelf. It's definitely probably in the Legislative Library and at the Department of Education. It doesn't feel like it's going to urgently deal with anything, and people have urgent needs, and that's why they're so motivated. That's why they're outside begging us to actually listen. I counted up quickly, and I don't know that everything I counted in there belongs there, but looking at budget estimates, I tallied $9 million that the department spends at the department level on improving education, on innovation. We often talk about our students' need to get back to basics. But what about the department getting back to basics? What about the department seeing its role as supporting the experts who are the teachers in the classrooms who are actually face-to-face with the kids of this province? What about directing every possible resource we can to lowering class sizes at all levels? What a tremendous difference that could make. And it would make a difference not just practically, not just because teachers would be able to maybe circulate around desks and actually look over a student's shoulder as they're doing work, but it would also make a difference symbolically and in the relationship that we have as the government of Nova Scotia with some of our most important public servants, the teachers of Nova Scotia. Because that's who they are. It's a different different collective agreement, but there's no question in my mind that they're public servants, and some of the most important that we have, and the ones that actually knit us together as a society. Because public school is where we meet each other. Public school and the playgrounds of public schools are where parents meet each other. And at SAC committees and at home and school associations and at fundraisers and at school fairs. Public schools are, I mean, I don't meet people at the mall. Where I grew up, we all met at the mall. But I don't meet people. I don't go to the mall here, so I don't meet people at the mall here. I meet people through connections with school. And if we don't build those institutions, if we don't support those institutions, if we don't leave the teachers working within those institutions with some hope, some help, then we can't expect them to continue to play that crucial role for us as a democracy, as a society. So that's why I really do think that bringing in this bill would be a big mistake. It would be a big mistake. And frankly, as a member of the opposition, I think bringing in this bill would be a favor to us by the Liberal caucus going into an election. You know, I think it would serve our political interest just perfectly fine if you bring in this bill. I don't think it would serve the needs of this province, though. I don't think it would serve the needs of our teachers. And I reject any characterization of the situation under the current work to rule as an emergency that needs to be solved. Yes, there are grade 12 students. There are grade 12 students for whom prom is important, for whom letters of reference are important. And I get that, and I feel for those people. I remember clearly being in grade 12 and some of my classmates saying, "But this is the most important night of my life," when something was going to interfere with prom. And I was just like kind of gritting my teeth and clenching my fist to get through high school, going, "Please may this not be the most important night of my life, please." And indeed it was not, nor by a country mile, but I remember that perspective of like, this is it, this is grade 12.
Yeah, I think so, thanks. Yeah, that'd be a good start.
So I do feel for those students, and I know that teachers are doing their best to be kind. And I also know that they've taken a difficult stance because they feel like they've really been forced into a corner. And I want to go to the Legislative Library and get a copy of the Freeman Report, and I might see what report was done by the government before that, and the government before that. And I think really, I'm new at this. I'm new in the House. I don't have the memory of who did what and what we shouldn't talk about too much because the NDP messed up that file. I know we messed up files. I know you've messed up files in previous governments. I know you've messed up files in previous governments. But we're all here. But we're all here right now. And for teachers, some of whom have been there for 25 years, they don't care. They don't care that, well, we were going to do these great reforms and then we got voted out of office. Or you know, this strategy was about to roll out and then the government changed. Frankly, all of us together could just decide, no, you know what, we're going to actually help out these most important public servants in Nova Scotia right now and not do it to score a political point one way or the other, and give them reason to believe that their voices have actually been heard. And I think we as elected officials and this institution has to come up with ways of not baiting and switching on reforms and improvements with the electoral cycle. Because it did take a lot longer than 3 years for the public education system of Nova Scotia to get into the state of crisis that it is in right now. The Liberal government does not own that. It shouldn't have to own that. The NDP government before it can share that. The Conservative governments before it can share that. Teachers talk about it going back 12, 15 years. But what you do own right now is this moment and this majority. And so that is why I add my voice to the voices of the teachers who have been out there circling Province House all night, angrier and more frustrated and more motivated and more organized than I think we have ever seen them, on strike for the first time in this province's history. And this is your moment. This is your moment where you can choose not to do this, because it won't fix it. It won't fix it. And it will, and because there is no emergency. The emergency is every day in the classrooms, in the conditions that have been described to us by teachers, and we should address those first and foremost. Tell the department to stand by and stand off and get out of the way and let as many resources as possible flow to the classrooms of Nova Scotia and to the experts who teach there, to the most educated, most prepared cohort of Nova Scotia teachers that we have ever had, and enable them and give them the tools that they need to do their jobs and to meet the needs of their kids. And frankly, if a collective agreement isn't arrived at for 6 months, because it would probably take 6 months to repair the relationships that have been damaged over the last 15 months, that's okay. They're not saying that they're not going to show up at work. They've been working to rule, and I think maybe we could get to a spot where they're not working to rule anymore. They're just working, but without a collective agreement, while we rebuild relationships. I think we could get there. And this bill is a shortcut to an unhappy future for educators in Nova Scotia. And I think it's a shortcut to this government's legacy, and it won't be one that is that we'll be able to feel proud of. So thank you very much. I think I may have spoken 30 minutes, and I'm going to get up to an hour one day, but I'm not there yet. Thank you.